My name is Carlos Urban, and today I'm going to talk to you about the most important functions and settings of the Nikon D7500. If you see my videos, I have a lot of videos on the D7000 and D800, which are the cameras that I have. What I notice is even though I don't have the 7500, it's actually very similar to my other two cameras. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a combination of showing you with my camera and also here in the manual if there is a setting that I don't have in my camera. So let's start with the top of the camera first, because the top of the camera is always very important, okay? So the drawings here are very clear. So the first thing I want you to do is to turn it on. So basically, move the power switch. And I'll show you later how you can do different things with the auto switch. But on the auto switch, on top of it, you have the shutter release, which right now, if you have it in the default, when you touch it halfway, it should be focusing. This sound like this, when I go like this, means that it's in focus, okay? So yours should be doing the same. If not, when we go through the settings, we'll figure out why it's not doing that. Okay, so let's start on this side. Here, this button is to record, the record button. In the D7000, the record button for the video is here. So the same thing. The ISO in the D7000 and D71 and 7200 is here on the left side, but it's the same thing. This is the same place. This is the exposure compensation. We'll talk about that in a minute, okay? Then on this side, basically you have basically two buttons. One button, which is this one, number 5. If you press that, it allows you to move the bottom functions, the ones that say S, CL, CH, okay? If you touch the one on the top, then it allows you to move the other settings, okay? In the past, you didn't have that button, so sometimes when you had it in manual, if you didn't notice, you would switch it to Aperture Priority or any of the other priorities without noticing. So they put this button now so that doesn't happen. Let's see, what else do we have here? Well, this is the accessory shoe. They call it, sometimes they call it a hot shoe. This is where the flash goes, the external flash. So you have the pop-up flash. By the way, you have like a little, here you have like a little, what do you call it, like a lightning, and that basically, if you click it, then it pops up the flash, okay? So let's keep on going here. Let's see, well, in the release dial, let me just see something, if I can see the detail here so I can explain it to you. Let's see, 86. Oh, okay, yes. So let's explain what each one of these means. Basically, it's very simple. S means when you're taking one shot at a time, okay? You basically have two different modes of continuous. Continuous just means that when I click, it takes several shots, okay? So the continuous low, which you'll see in the settings, you can put it from up to 7 frames per second. The high, you can put it up to 8 frames per second, okay? So usually what I do, I never use the low. I don't even know why some people use the low, but the high, I always have it to the maximum. So in this case, you should have it at 8. The D7000, 7100, 7200, I think went up to 6. So this one now it goes to 8. The quiet release, I never use it. It basically is a little quieter, but it's not that much quieter. I mean, it really is not that much quieter, really. You can put it for the single, you can put it for the continuous. Now the self timer, that I use a lot. And I'll show you later how to set it up for different minutes. You can do that in the setting. But the self timer is what I use a lot for landscapes, for example, because I don't want to, if I press here, when I take the shot, you're already moving the camera. So you want to self the timer, or if you have a release, then, you know, I have the cable release, but I always forget it. So you can use the timer for that. Or if you want to be in the picture, you know, you can set the timer so that you can go. And by the way, if you look, this camera looks a little different because it has the battery pack, okay? So that's the reason why it looks a little different. Mirror up is important. You can use, so mirror up is also another way to avoid movement. So you put mirror up and you see now the mirror is up, okay? So that avoids a little bit more shake. And then when I click it, it takes a picture. I honestly almost never use it. It's also used to clean the sensor, which I don't, I try cleaning the sensor at the beginning, but it's very delicate. It's better to have it done professionally, to be honest with you. Okay, let's see what else do we have here. Okay, so then you have the mode dials. So these are the ones here on the top. Basically, if you bought a D7500, this is probably not your first camera. If it is your first camera, then you probably want to start in auto, but very quickly move to these three modes. This is shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual. Shutter priority basically means that you set up the shutter speed and the camera automatically sets the aperture. That's useful, like if you're shooting sports, or you know, if you're going, let's say, to a Little League game or something, and you want to have at least 1,000th of a second, then it will automatically set your aperture, okay? Aperture priority, which is the one that a lot of people use, you set the aperture you want. So let's say I want, you know, a shallow depth of field. That means when you want a blurry background, which is usually what you do in portrait. So then you basically, so I have it aperture priority. Now, why did it? So it only 1/4 of a second because I have it in ISO 400 and it's already dark in here. So at 3.5, it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be very, very fast. Now, if I change the ISO, so I'm going to put the ISO to 800, okay? So by the way, so just changing the ISO. See, now the ISO is 800, okay? Now it went at 3.5, so this one, the lowest, or the aperture is 3.5, because this is a lens that starts at 3.5. No, this is very slow, this is 1/15th of a second, so that's not, why is it doing that? Okay, I'm gonna change lenses for a second. So this is actually a good thing, how to change a lens. I'm gonna change this lens, okay? Turn it off, always turn it off. Put it this way, so you press on this, put it this way, that way there is less probability that dust goes in, okay? Have the cap on, okay? Put it to 51.8 because it's a little dark in here, so I want to be able to go to 1.8. Okay, so turn it on. Okay, now we're at 1.8. When I take a picture, oh, you know what's going on? This is so funny. I have it in the mirror up. No wonder why it was doing that. Okay, so single point, put it in single point. Now I'll explain to you why you want to have it in single point. When you're taking like a portrait or something like that, that means it's in focus. Okay, so let me see. I'm going to take a picture of something that. So you can see here is a picture of the. you can see clearly, okay? You can see here is the tripod, and then in the back is completely blurred. So this is exactly what I wanted to do. So that's why Aperture Priority is so useful, okay? All right, let's keep on going. The reason why I spend some time on that is because that is really very important, okay? When you start shooting, start practicing in these two, Aperture Priority, Shutter Priority. As a matter of fact, I would say Aperture Priority. I'll explain to you later how to put the ISO automatically because the ISO is a little more complicated. And then manual, you do that mostly when you're using flash, because flash sometimes, or studio lights, you can go more than 250th of a second. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, okay? These over here, I never use these ones. Scene, it will give you different effects. U1 and U2, if you want to have different settings. I never ever have used this, okay? I've had this camera for 11 years and I've never used this. So let's move to the control panel. So the control panel is what's on the top, okay? So this over here is your control panel. These days, a lot of people don't use that because whenever you're in the viewfinder, you have all the information. But anyway, if you look at the view panel, you have, so this is the shutter speed, the aperture, you have the ISO. This symbol is very important. This is the metering. We'll talk about metering later. Metering, you basically have three types of metering. You have the matrix, which takes into account the exposure of the whole frame. Then you have, well, let's talk about it now. Then you have this one, center weighted, where the emphasis of the exposure is this one. So this is really, so it says it's recommended for portraits. So if, you know, let's say the face is here in the middle and you're not using a speed light or flash, then the exposure really is on the face, so you want to focus on that. Spot, almost never use that, okay? This is very, you know, and then there is a highlight weighted. Nobody uses this. Most people use spot, center weighted, and matrix. Usually I use matrix. But center weighted is very useful for portraits, okay? And so that's metering. And in the metering, you can change it. See here in the modes. See the metering button. The metering button used to be over here. We'll find it. Once we find it, you know, it's probably in the, once we get to the, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the viewfinder. Let's talk about the viewfinder. We'll go one by one. What's important about the viewfinder? With the viewfinder, what's important is, well, all these points that you have here. And you can put it on, if you have single focus, which by the way, here on the bottom, we'll talk about that later, you can change, you press this button here, and you can change to single focus. Okay, so single focus or continuous focus, and you can put how many focus points you want, or automatic. I usually have single or continuous, okay? So when you have single, then you have all of these, and you can put wherever the focus. So let's say, you know, you have a garden and you have a bird, and the bird is over here, and you want to frame it exactly like that. So you put it over here. Or let's say you're taking a portrait, you always want to focus in the eye. So let's say the eye, this is the face. So let's say the eye is right here. So you want to put the focus point over there. Okay? Let's see what else we have here that is important. Oh my God, sorry. Let me put this a little smaller. Okay, number 9, pitch indicator. This is the one that is important. 11, roll indicator. So this is what tells you if it's underexposed or overexposed. Okay. This shows you have no memory card. This is if you have different effects. This one is important. This is the if it's in focus or not. Number 12, focus indicator. So when it's like this, it means that it's in focus. Here, if you have the auto exposure locked, there is a lot of things here that is very strange because, again, these are things that are usually not. Oh, sorry, this is the one that. Oh yeah, the exposure is here. So this is overexposed, or depending what you have. Here you have usually the minus, here the plus. Here you have, if you have bracketing, exposure compensation, over or under, the ISO, if you have it in auto ISO, and then here, most importantly, tells you, oh, so the other is to tell you how many pictures you have left. Yeah, numbers of exposures remaining. Okay, when you have 1,000, let's see, HDR, well, that's if you're doing HDR. What else? Those are the most important ones. Exposure bracketing, we already saw exposure compensation, flash compensation, which is something I never used, but anyway, you have all those indicators. Diopter control. Okay, so here, this little thing here is important for people that use glasses. So if you press that button over here, okay, over here, you can basically set it so that it's higher or lower, in you know, for your glasses. Okay. So when you move it, you'll see if your viewfinder is in focus or not in focus, depending on your eyesight. Okay, so this just shows how to tilt the monitor. Very good feature. So mine doesn't have that. Mine has the, and then you know you have the touchscreen, which basically you can do everything with the. Okay, so let's see over here. You have menu, white balance. Here it is. Here, this right here is where you change the metering. So here is in matrix. So this is one thing that they changed. Now they put it here instead of on the top. And they put the ISO on the top. This is the information. So all the information is projected in the screen. So you can do it here or here. Okay. This is the live view. This is the wheel. You can turn it, and here, when you put it in L, means that you lock the focus. So if you notice that your focus points are not moving when you move this, you know, up and down. So you're moving this, okay, this up and down. If it's not moving the dots inside, means that you lock the focus. So you need to unlock it. Okay. Well, this is how to put the strap. I'm going to waste time on that. I want to go to the settings. Okay. So let's put this a little smaller. So ISO, okay, ISO, you have auto ISO. So that means it will automatically set up the ISO for you. Or you can put it so that you set the ISO yourself. You know, my recommendation is at the beginning use the auto, and you'll see in the moment how you can control the auto, you know, so that it doesn't go too high. So, yeah, so here in the ISO sensitivity settings, you can set it on, okay, or you can set it off. I have it off because I like to control the ISO myself. But if you're a starter, put the ISO in auto. The exposure, we already talked about the exposure. Okay, white balance. These cameras are very good in the auto white balance, so I usually have it in auto. Now, the only time that I don't have it in auto is when I'm using lights. So I'll have a lot of video on lights. My lights are set up for 5200 K, so I set that myself. You know, the temperature I set it myself. Or I don't want the white balance to change too much, so then I usually put it in daylight. Now, if you're shooting raw, it doesn't really matter because you can change the white balance in you know, in your pictures in the processing. But if you don't want it to go up and down all the time, then I suggest that you put it in daylight. Daylight is something that is going to work just about for everything. Okay. Now, if you're shooting JPEG, you have all of these different modes. You can do portrait, skin, flat. I do not use any of this because I don't shoot in JPEG. Now, something that is important is I do have it set up for neutral for one reason. If for some reason I wanted to shoot in JPEG, or I want to see the screen that you see here when you take a picture, okay? When you take a picture, what it shows you here is showing you a JPEG. And the one that is most similar to RAW would be neutral. So I set it to neutral. Flash photography, I'm not going to spend time here. I have a whole video on how to do the command mode on your flash. Flash is a complicated subject, and one thing that I will tell you is I never use the pop-up flash. This flash is very small and it's not very useful. So I suggest you get a separate flash, okay? And then you can control, the good thing about this pop-up flash is that it controls the other flash. So if you decide to put your flash in a stand, for example, or in a tripod, then you can control it from here. Now, once in a blue moon, if I didn't take with me my speed light or my flash, which I usually do, but let's say, and I need a little bit of light, then I would use this. But this is so small that you're almost better off putting it in higher ISO than using flash. Remote control photography. So one of the advantages of this camera is that it allows you to do remote control. I'm not going to spend time talking about recording because recording videos is a whole other subject. I'd rather spend the time talking about the menus. Okay. Here in the menus, what is important is this right here. In the menus for the playback, so if I go to menus, okay, you have your playback menu. So this is the ones that we're talking about. What's important about the playback is when you have the image review, okay, why doesn't this show? This is very interesting. The way it shows this is not the way I would have liked to. Okay, I usually don't move the defaults from this. The only thing is when I look at the pictures, sometimes I want to be able to see over here how I can, if I click here, I can also see the highlights. Those are called blinkings. I can also look at the histogram. Okay, and this is where it took the picture, where it focused. You see the point is right on the what's it called? Not the monopod, the tripod. So let's see. Okay, here it is. So in the playback, you want to be able to look at all this. So in the playback, what I have it on playback display mode. In the display mode, you see over here, it's terrible that in the manual they don't show it better. Okay, you can select different things. So I have selected the focus point and the highlights. That's basically what I have, because it automatically shows you the histogram. Okay, so so this is the playback. Let's see. The shooting menu. So in the shooting menu, I don't really do anything there. I basically leave it all as the default. Storage folder, if you want to change it, I do that in Lightroom. The file naming, I leave it as DSC. Again, this is not very important. But we're not going to talk about the movies, so let's go to what this is important stuff. Okay, so these are what is called the custom settings menu. Custom settings menu, okay, is basically, so let me make sure you see it real well. Here you have A, B, C, D, E, and F, okay? So those are the ones that are really, really important. And those are the ones that I'm going to review with you real quick, okay? So first you have A, which is the autofocus. These are the autofocus menu. And you can, so basically what I have is the AFC priority. You can put it on release or focus. I have it on focus, so for me that's more important. When I press it, I want it to focus. So this is the part where you want to leave it in focus. Okay, the same thing on the when you have it in single priority. Okay, in single priority, I also have it in the focus, because this is basically all this is saying is that when you press a button halfway, what is your priority? Your priority is to focus. Okay, focus tracking with lock. This I never have touched. Number of focus points, you want 51. 51, this is the default. Okay, so this is good. Oh, okay, 3. Yeah, this is just, don't worry about it. This is really, nobody uses this. This is the thing that these cameras, they have so many functions and nobody ever uses. But anyway, let's see, A4. Number of focus points, 51, yeah. Store points by orientation. I have them so that the orientation is usually horizontal. Activation, AF activation. So this AF illumination. Oh, okay. This is your autofocus activation. Yeah, put it on the shutter, and there is also a button that you can use. This is so. How do you focus? When you focus, you can either focus halfway pressing this, or you have a button here where you can focus here. It's called backfold. Some people like to do that when they focus. I have it on this. That is both. Wrap around. This is if you want the points to wrap around when you go to the end. Up to you. I don't have it. I have it in no wrap, which is the default. Focus point illumination. Yes, I always want to illuminate it. AF assist illuminator. So let's look at what the default and if I change it or not. Yes. So this is when it's dark. Let's say I'm shooting to a place that is dark. Well, this light right here, when it's very dark, basically comes on and helps you illuminate, because otherwise you cannot focus. So that you want to have on. I wonder if I don't have it on. Well, I'll check it later, but you want to have it on because this is, yeah, I have it on. Okay, illuminator. It's interesting. This light usually comes on and helps you focus. I don't know if it went on. Well, anyway. So you want to have it on. Manual focus ring on AF mode. Enable, yes, you want to be able to focus. So this is this focus ring. Yes, of course you want to be able, you know, Manual focus very often is used only if you're doing macros. Some people do manual focus. My eyesight is so bad that I don't. Meter exposure, you always want to have it in 1/3 a step. This is the standard that everybody uses. Okay. Easy exposure compensation. No, leave it off. You want to do the exposure compensation with this button. You don't want to do it with anything else. This, again, a lot of things that are auto. Choose phase detection, enable matrix. Oh, this is interesting. So when you have matrix metering, now you can put phase detection on, so it detects there is a phase, and then you don't need to use the center weighted or the fine tuning. This is really good. That's something new that is very useful. This is whether you want the auto exposure to lock when you have the timer. You can, it's off. I've never used that, but I guess if you put it on, you can do it pressed or personal. Never have used that for the timer. Okay, so here, this is important. This is what I was telling you before. In the timer, here you can change your standby timer, okay? So the default is 6 seconds, that's about right. The self timer, same thing. Okay, so the difference between standby timer and self timer. Mine doesn't have standby timer. This is a new thing. It's how long you want the exposure to stay. It says the default is 6 seconds. That's fine. The self timer, again, you can put the number that you want. You can, by the way, in the self timer you have different options. How much is the delay? The number of shots, the interval between shots, so all that. How long the monitor remains on, that's up to you. This is if you want. So if you're using a remote, okay, the default on how much you want it to stay on is 1 minute. That's fine. Okay, so this is what I was talking to you about before. The CL, you have the CL and the CH. The CL allows you to go from 1 frame per second to 7. The default is 3. I would leave it at 3. Maximum continuous release, that's when you press the button, how many pictures the maximum that you wanted to shoot. 100, yes, I always use the maximum. Exposure, sorry, that's interesting. Sorry, I thought that it went over. Exposure delay mode, I don't use this. I would leave the default. Electronic front curtain shutter, never have used this. Again, I leave it disabled. File number sequence, yes, of course you want to have it in sequence. Viewfinder grid display, this is interesting. If you like to have a grid so that it shows in the viewfinder, that way you can see if, for example, the horizon is straight, or if you want, a building, then you can put that grid. Some people don't like it because it's a little bit annoying. The ISO, yes, of course you want to show the ISO. So leave it in the default. LCD illumination, I have that in on. I always have it on. The LCD, I always have it on. Oh, this is interesting. Turn control on and off the vibration reduction. This is something that you couldn't do before only on the lens. I have it on the lens. Bracketing. This one, the default is 1/250th of a second. This is the sync speed. This is what I was talking to you about when you're doing studio lights. 250th of a second is what most studio lights work for. Some can go up to 320th of a second. The lowest, the default 1/60th of a second, that doesn't really matter. Again, you're shooting in manual, so it really doesn't matter. Exposure compensation for flash. Yeah, I don't do exposure. If you see my speedlight videos, you can control the flash completely separate from the camera. I don't recommend that you use the, okay, so auto ISO sensitivity. So this is whether the ISO is adjusted correctly into the subject and the background. You can put a subject and background. So remember again the example of the portrait. Okay, the ISO is going to focus on the portrait, the person, meaning the subject, or on everything. If you have it in matrix and you have the priority of the portrait, then the ISO will adjust automatically based on that. The bracketing, leave it as default. This is when you're doing like HDR. You can assign all the different buttons, different roles. I'm not going to spend time on that. That's something that is up to you. It's not something that is that important. The OK button, leave it like that. Don't do anything to that. These are the things, don't touch them. Reverse indicators. The default is from minus to plus. This is the exposure, if it's underexposed or underexposed. Movies, we're not going to go over. Formatting, okay, this is important. Formatting memory cards. There is different ways to format your memory card, okay? There is one option is you press the ISO and the trash button automatic, these two buttons at the same time, and that formats your camera. Then in the menu, if you go to the menu and you go to your setup, menu setup, there is one right there, the first one that says format. So that's another way of formatting. Brightness of virtual horizon. This one is interesting. Virtual horizon is something that basically tells you if you put something in the see right here, it tells you if the camera is straight or not. Okay, that's very useful when you're taking a picture of a landscape, which I'll do a separate video for that. Again, I don't want this video to run forever. I have another video that is almost an hour long, which you can see, that goes into a lot more detail. No, don't touch any of this. Leave it as the defaults. Clean the image sensor. Yes, you can do that. Lock up the mirror. Again, this is only if you want to clean your sensor. I clean the image sensor with the camera, which is the function that you have there. Yeah, that I recommend. It does it automatically. But when you have to get like a Q-tip or and clean it yourself, I recommend that you take it to a dealer. They do a much better job, and you don't run the risk of ruining your sensor. It's very. So you can also put your copyright information. I just put my name. Okay. Beep options. You have again, these are all in the custom settings. The beep options. You can, if you don't want the beep so loud, you can even turn it off. Okay. I don't really do. I like the beep because the beep tells me if it's in focus or not. Oh well, the Wi-Fi. This is for the airplane. If you're on you have the airplane mode. So that's one of the big differences between the 7500 and the older models. The 7500 has the Wi-Fi already incorporated. It has Bluetooth. So this is awesome because this is something that my camera doesn't have. Let's see what else. Oh, this is when you set up your camera originally. You put the time zone. I don't need to tell you how to put the date and all that. Don't do so. Something very important. Never edit your pictures in your camera. You learn how to use Lightroom, or if Lightroom is my recommendation. It's not that difficult. I have many videos on using Lightroom and do everything in right lighting. This thing, de-lighting, make sure that it's off. You don't want the camera to be doing these things because then you don't have control of your pictures. You can do all of this, you can do in Lightroom. So retouching, no. Compatible lenses. This is if you're using CPU lenses. I thought that all the lenses were compatible. Well, I guess this PC maker, I know. I guess there are some lenses that are not compatible, but that's not. Okay, troubleshooting. I think I've covered the most important things. If there is something, put it in the comments and I'll be more than happy to answer, okay? But for now, I think I'm gonna finish the video here.